So a service line in the DfE or in any org, if for that matter, um, it's a grouping of services, right? But just not just any old group of services. It's a grouping that means something to people. And it might mean something to users. It might also mean something to the organization or to stakeholders or to ministers. And, you know, we can't be fixed in our mindset. We do have to be fluid at times and understand the right grouping for the right time. Um, but yeah, it's about how you put services together to make them make sense. So for me in DfE and for the work we've done so far, the thing that makes a service line different from a service is that a service solves a problem for a user, but like a single problem at a point in time. Whereas in a service line, it might help a user to solve a series of problems that help them achieve like a life goal or something over a longer period of time. For example, users are going to use your service and then they're going to go away and they're going to forget about it and forget about you and forget about government and get on with their life. And that's right. That's what you want them to do. But then they're going to come back and they may or may not want you to remember that, right? They might be a different person. They might have a different name. They might think about themselves differently across like their whole life course. Longitudinal data becomes available. So we can think about someone who's done something 3 years ago is now coming back to us and doing something else. And that decision they made 2 years ago might have an influence on that and help us to make policy in a way that if we didn't know that, we might not have been able to do something. So being able to remember who people are and put together data on what they did 2 years ago with what they're doing now can help us make better decisions and help them get to the right decision faster, so save them time. And I was thinking about this from another perspective, like not the DfE perspective, when I went on holiday recently, right? I was going to France and I wanted to know do I need to make sure I don't have COVID or get a vaccine passport, whatever. And so I went to gov.uk and I looked at the guidance on France, and then I found out I needed a booster and you need a booster within the last 9 months or something to go. I went to the NHS website to book a booster. I went to my local GP surgery to get that booster. I applied to get a passport for my kids from the passport office. I downloaded the NHS app to get my COVID pass, and then I went through border control. And all of that helped me achieve my goal of eating cheese and drinking wine in the warm, right, in France. But it was a service line for me because it was all these things that I had to do in time. And probably those organizations don't think of themselves as a service line, but they are, because it was a bunch of small bits of value, but brought together, I got what I wanted, right? I got there. And so we've got a job to do in making sure that we join up between those different parts, because users expect that. So when I went onto the COVID app, I put my passport number in or something, I knew who I was. So like there's been some integration, like there's been some thought given to how they pass data about me between the different government organizations, which is really impressive. If you're a service owner, sometimes you can find that your services sit in other people's service lines or they sit in yours, because of this idea that actually service lines might be a bit of a fluid concept. Sometimes to help another service line to complete their journey, you've got to do something for them or vice versa. So I think in departments it's kind of easier to do this because you need to have good relationships and working level collaboration between teams, and you also need it as a service owner with your kind of counterpart in the other service line, because this is about compromise and about thinking about the bigger picture. So for example, in teacher services, you might have something like teaching vacancies, where your service is to serve teachers, right? It's to help teachers get a job, but it's also a service which faces into school business managers and recruiters inside schools, and that's a really key part of the school resource management portfolio and set of objectives. So there's a really important interplay between how we help teachers find jobs, but also how we help schools be efficient. And that starts with understanding that both of those things are important for the organisation. And then it follows through to good understanding relationships between service owners, but also between teams. So working in the open is really, really important. Being upfront with what you're trying to achieve, and then making the time to build relationships. Building a service line from scratch is a really big ask, because I feel like service lines emerge. They're almost not something you should plan from the start. They're something you should realize is a thing as people go through a journey, right? You got to start with finding the important bits of value, like the value touch points, the value endpoints in your service. And then and only then can you start to string them together. And don't plan a route through them all at the start. Find out how the route through the first thing you do emerges and what's left after that. Because often solving that first initial problem simplifies so much else, right? If you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, there are a million pictures you could draw on it. But once you've drawn like a triangle in it, there's only so many things you can do with that triangle, right? So choosing the first thing really, really carefully, and that being your anchor, and then using that to say, right, now that we've got this anchor, here's a potential place we could be going, or here's a potential place we could be going, or here's a potential place we could be going. So let's head in that direction, and we'll see if we're okay. Then build your second thing, right? And then the line emerges, it comes at you. So something that really impressed me in teacher services was how Rachel Hope, after building the Find and the Apply services and teaching vacancies, kind of was finding this thread about teacher identity was what was holding us back, and how that allows us to work with data, and how it allows us to identify teachers, and how it allows us to personalize the experiences. And so then it was clear that the next stepping stone was about identity. If we had started from a blank sheet of paper at the start, it would have been a very, very different question, and we would have asked the wrong question about identity. In practice, this is all about making careful decisions about where you decide to invest your time. So the places where we've been successful in the past, we've always found that vehicle for learning, right? That place that allows you to quickly get much more insights. And so the way that I've seen this work really well is develop a product, a small thing that solves one problem, but be careful about which product it is, right? So it has to have a high transaction volume. It needs to be close enough to the core problem for the service line that it allows you to interrogate that problem too. It needs to be kind of simple enough that there's an easy answer to how you're going to solve it, because you don't want to have, to have to go through too many iterations before you get there. And then once you've found that, just learn until you're confident enough to know what that next step is. So find a vehicle that helps you learn, go for volume, go for where there's value, and go for something which you can solve pretty quickly and simply. And I just avoid at all costs the trap of endless discovery. Like, if learn by doing, get it out there, even if it's the wrong thing, that's okay. Like, you're learning and exploring and trying the stuff out. That's truly agile. Like, that's what we need to be doing. Endless discovery can go on for years and years and years, and you'll never be any closer to actually learning what is going to move the needle on this. And the people will change, the users will change, the context will change, the technology will change faster than you can research it. So get the thing out there and shorten your insight loop.